So I think the next one is Uttara Bhadrapada.
Okay, yes.
And basically with Porva Palguni and Uttara Palguni, Porva Ashada and Uttara Ashada, and Porva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada, the Porvas and Uttaras form one section of sky, which is why you have the Porva, which means former, and Uttara, which means latter. Okay? This is a very mysterious nakshatra. And if we're considering the journey of consciousness, well, let's backtrack to Porva Bhadrapada. So a person becomes inspired with like a missionary zeal to do something, okay? And on the other level, that becomes an act of devotion to them. With Uttara Bhadrapada, here you have the confrontation with one's ignorance. I also like using the analogy of every path itself can become an attachment. And before we can attain that final stage of liberation, we have to let go even of those paths that got us to that particular location. Because otherwise we're holding on to that. So what tends to happen with Uttara Bhadrapada is our ignorance gets pointed out to us very deeply. It's associated with a particular demon or entity called Ahirbudnya, which is related to another demon, and both of them are associated with the concept of ignorance or primordial ignorance. I'm going to go a little bit deeper with that concept. It's the concept of the great darkness. We need both light and dark while we're here in physical manifestation, because otherwise we don't go through the evolutionary process. The darkness, we need the light to show us where we're being ignorant. And we need that ignorance so that we can come closer to the light. So they're both necessary forces. I like using the analogy of, think of the concept of having a dark pool in front of you. But if you look at that pool, it's not going to show you your reflection. It's just going to show you your ignorance and something different from the way you thought things were initially. Uttara Bhadrapada is actually a passive energy, but it reacts with the force that is activating it, which on the evolutionary scale would be one's own karma, right? So it's giving when one's karma is applied to that energy of Uttara Bhadrapada is going to show where the person is lost, okay? It's a very paradigm-shattering nakshatra. It will hit us almost like with a bolt out of the blue. Just when you think that you knew the way something was, well, this energy is going to show you that it's completely the opposite of what you thought it was, because that's the only way you're going to let go of that particular attachment. It's the final negation of all existence, is what this particular energy would represent. The Shakti that's connected to it is the power to bring the cosmic rain. So if we think of rain or a rainstorm, well, generally that's something that you don't want. Quite often it can even be attached to a storm. Okay? The basis above with this is the raining clouds. So the heavens give us raining clouds. It kind of rains on our parade, on our seeming parade, but that's more of what our ego is attached to. The basis below, though, is that we need that rain so that the plants can grow, so that we're able to be nourished. And what comes through those things that we think that we sometimes don't want, and through the growth that comes from confronting those things, is stability. Right understanding of what one is actually dealing with. And it's no surprise with this particular nakshatra that it's associated with Saturn, because Saturn rules over ignorance. He's going to point out to us where we're wrong. Saturn also rules over discipline. right? So then once we know what's wrong, applying ourselves, being very disciplined in our practice in order to overcome this. Okay. So go ahead.
Does this, I think about the idea of the pool that you describe and the idea of noticing the darkness of your ignorance and these sorts of things. Does this energy exacerbate the kind of ignorance you might have in regards to a planet in this nakshatra, or meaning does it kind of make it so big and ridiculous that that's how you see it, or is it more just you suffer because of it and therefore you have to kind of face it and move through it? Does this make sense?
It would depend on the planet that's there. If you had a very cruel-oriented planet, then you would probably, just keep pushing until you had a, big breakthrough that wasn't perhaps the breakthrough you were looking for.
Okay.
Or let's say if you had the moon, which is much more of a passive and reflective planet, then it would likely, create sadness or something which would cause you to reflect upon the situation that you're dealing with. But that's really just one aspect of Uttara Bhadrapada. It's a very vast nakshatra.
So,
very vast. Go ahead.
But with that idea, in the end, no matter how it works, whether it's a cruel planet or even a gentle, reflective planet, the kind of final experience with that particular situation, whatever it might be, whatever planet's in that nakshatra or whatever house lord is in the nakshatra, that it leads or reveals like a disillusionment to where you have to sort of face that and then kind of let go of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Let's use a good analogy, which is Che Guevara. And I think it was his son. I'm not sure. I think it was his son that was in Uttara Bhadrapada.
Okay.
There's a book of his called Motorcycle Diaries.
Right.
And he talks about, it's about his travels, which kind of brought him to do what he did, encountering suffering and how people were being mistreated, and those who had very little were treated not very well. And so it was a very eye-opening experience for him. So There you have that Uttara Bhadrapada realization, which then led to him becoming very determined to create a change, because Uttara Bhadrapada, each of the nakshatras also has a caste associated with it. And Uttara Bhadrapada is a kshatriya nakshatra.
Okay.
So it has a very warrior-driven energy that's associated with it. Okay. So once that negation actually happens, then there's a new energy that comes from it. And that's why Porva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada are really just one area of the sky.
Okay.
They create the foundation for the final resting, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay. And it's important to point out that the chart that we're talking about here, there is actually some discrepancy about that birth date, actually. According to Wikipedia, it says his birth certificate says it was June 14th, 1928. And according to some other sources, there's an assertion that he was born on May 14th, 1928. So it would make more sense, if we're using the nakshatras in this regard, to use the time in which, was it Mars you said was in?
It's his Mars. I said at first his sun, but upon looking at that, it's his natal Mars.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So just wanted to clear that up for people in case they go and look up his chart. So anyway, all right. So let's go ahead and continue.
Right. So looking at the gunas that are associated with this, it's sattvic at its basis, and it builds upon that with tamasic energy. Okay. So this can be looked at two ways, which is once the person attains that sattvic state, they're going to be very tamasic in how they work towards the realization of acting that energy out. So let's say one comes to a divine realization or has an aha moment, eureka moment because of dealing with something. Well, then that's going to make them be very firm in what they're working towards, which could lead further down the line to another breakthrough and another paradigm being shattered, because there's the concept of dogma versus dharma. We can become very dogmatic about something. We think things are exactly a certain way, and we become very driven by that concept. only to find out that, well, you had it wrong. So now we're going to change your path and change what you thought you knew. And so then you go, okay, well, this is actually the way things are. And then you find out wrong again. And Dharma is something that's ever evolving, and dogma is quite often something that we just get stuck in.
Right.
Yeah. So no matter what happens under the energy of Uttara Bhadrapada, there is going to be the expansion of consciousness. Right. But what happens with that expansion of consciousness is it's preceded by right understanding. But that right understanding is what's right for the moment, which may not be right for the very next moment. And that's important to understand. But what the energy is driving one to attain is no longer having a thirst for the concept of material existence or what one is becoming attached to. Because it's only when you let go of all those concepts, and that's why I was touching on the concept of even at the end, you have to let go of those paths that brought you there, because that's part of the material existence.
Mm-hmm.
That is just a path. That's not the ultimate truth. It's just the path itself. Interestingly enough, this is a kama-driven nakshatra, a desire-driven nakshatra, but it's driving one towards the desire for that realization, towards attaining that final state. Now, I'm talking purely on the spiritual level. The ways that it influences an individual on material level can be, very, desire-driven. The person will have a desire to do something, or they think that they know something, so they're filled with a desire to act in a particular manner, only to find out that they had something wrong. That's another way those forces can act with each other. And the Trimurti association with this is Vishnu. So it's about recognizing the illusion in the form and understanding the truth and the essence that's behind that illusion that's in the form.
And that makes sense, considering that this is the second to last nakshatra. Before we get to Revati, are we going to tie it all together with that nakshatra?
Exactly. Well, I hope we're going to tie it all together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all of lifetime has just been a complete waste of time.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't we move on to Revati?
Sure.
I think we covered everything with Uttara.